Hey everyone, welcome to the second edition of ZLDR, a show where we highlight a few big pieces of Zcash news and then dive into an opinion piece on current events in the Zcash ecosystem. I'm your host, Ian Sagstetter, and this week we're going to change up the format a bit. We're going to dive in to a bit of Zcash news from the actual newsletter. So if you're not familiar, Zec Weekly is a newsletter which recaps all the latest news within the Zcash ecosystem every single week. This last newsletter actually highlighted 2 weeks because we missed the week 14 edition of the newsletter, so we combined 14 and 15 together. And we're just going to go into the newsletter, highlight some of the main bits, and then we're going to go into the little talking point today, something I want to discuss, which has been on my mind recently. It's just this idea of like censorship resistance and privacy and public ledgers and how all of these things kind of like coexist and intertwine with each other in the space. So let's go into the news first. So the first bit here is in the first section of the newsletter, we're going to go over the ECC and Zcash Foundation updates. So if you click into this one, I want to highlight here, the Zcash Foundation, obviously we know that they tagged the first release client for Zebra, which is an alternative node implementation, the first alternative node implementation for Zcash on mainnet. And now they have shipped RC1 and that is ready for audit. So just want to give a massive shout out to the Zcash Foundation engineering team for getting this out there and getting this ready to roll. So the next bit of news we want to look at and touch on is Zgo. Massive shout out to Zgo because now they have a plugin for WooCommerce shops to accept Zec. So if you're not familiar with WooCommerce, it is a open source e-commerce platform that merchants can use to accept payments online. And what they've now done, I think it's being used by over 5 million people or 5 million merchants, one of those numbers there. And if you're not familiar with it, now Zgo has implemented a plugin so these people can easily accept Zcash should that be something they want to do. It's a part of this partnership, and just want to give a massive shout out to them because this is a really big, I think, gap that Zgo is solving, is that we need to get more people in the ecosystem accepting Zcash for payments in a peer-to-peer fashion, or even through this application like Zgo, giving people who are using Zcash, who want to use it to buy things and use it to spend it as money, giving them the opportunity and the liquidity and the opportunity within open markets to do that. So I think this is a massive bit of news. It's a massive feat for Zgo. If you want to click over here, this is actually the press release. So the integrations will provide merchants the ability to accept Zcash payments within their existing infrastructure using the Zgo gateway. This is really, really good news. And yeah, 5 million is the number. 5 million installations worldwide. So big news for Zgo and massive shout out to them. Here, it looks like, I think at 3 Eastern, so that would be 2 Central, 20, so 8 o'clock UTC. So today, J.W. Verrett, who is a professor at George Mason University and also a big proponent in Washington for crypto policy around privacy and censorship resistant, etc., massive freedom fighter, and then Kurt Opsahl, who is a part of the EFF, so the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who also do a lot of massive work ensuring that we all have digital rights and digital privacy rights. So they are both up to be members of the Open Zcash Foundation board slot, and today they are holding a community call so they can answer the questions that the community proposed to them in the forum. So if you want to check that out, that's going to be in a couple hours at 3 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock UTC. So massive bit of news there, and really excited to see how that conversation goes. Another shout out to Zcash Brazil. We talk a lot about the work that the ambassador programs are doing, and they did an interview with Bankless Brazil, and they talked about privacy, DAOs, CBDCs, and how to protect. I actually don't know what Vigilância Estatal means, so let's see is there a translation button? Let's translate it. I don't even know what that means. So here, Google Translate, boom. State surveillance. Oh, I probably should have known that. So here we go. So they talked about state surveillance and how Zcash can fight against all of these things. I'm going to actually dive into that episode right after I finish recording this so I can give you like some feedback. I'll probably do a small thread on it. Hopefully my Portuguese is good enough to where I can understand what's going on in the conversation. But again, really good that I know the Zcash Brazil team has been doing a lot of work within like the online communities in Zcash, but recently they've actually gone out and done conferences and been more involved with the broader Brazilian crypto community. So I really am bullish on Zcash adoption in Brazil due to a lot of the work that Michael and all the people within Zcash Brazil are doing. So shout out to them. If you haven't seen this, can speak Portuguese, or even if you can speak Spanish and slightly understand Portuguese like me, should listen to this interview. And yeah. The next bit, so it was Zcash's birthday, and I think we may have touched on this in the last CLDR, but it was Zcash's birthday, and to celebrate, this is really cool, the highest amount of ZEC ever stored in the shielded pools on the day of Zcash's birthday. So that's a really cool stat to take into consideration. And then also here, it was Zcash's 6th birthday. So there was a giveaway from the Electric Coin Company giving away 5 Cypherpunk 0 NFTs and 1 collectible toy. Those winners have been selected. They have all been notified, and we will be announcing the winners here shortly. So massive shout out to everyone who participated in this. And I know there was a bit of chatter of like, what's the point in doing this? But like, if you look at, I see a lot of the stats for different social media posts. I do want to say that this particular contest did get Zcash a lot of traction within social media. Maybe not as much as what people want, but it did move the needle in a positive direction. So I thought all in all, this was a really successful giveaway. It was fun. Someone's getting a really badass collectible toy, and people are also getting really cool Cypherpunk 0 NFTs, and they're going to be a part of this broader ecosystem community. So just really big shout out to ECC and the team working on that. Obviously, I'm a part of that team, but shout out to all my coworkers, and shout out to Charlie Rosenthal, who is the brains behind the Cypherpunk 0 NFT program. So really cool stuff there. So something I want to talk about today, and let's see if, let's go into my Twitter profile. So a comment I made a day or so ago, and excuse all my foul language on my Twitter. Where is it? So a comment I made a day or so ago was around Bitcoin. Here it is. So it's true that Bitcoin has so far delivered on its promise to be censorship resistant freedom money, but it shouldn't be controversial to say that governments are ramping up surveillance techniques. Alternatives should be considered for those who need it most. So just clicking back into the newsletter. So something I just want to highlight and touch on my opinion and my thoughts there is that I think that if you look at the history of people using like cryptocurrencies in crisis situations, so let's look at places like, well, I don't even know. I think Palestine's a really good example. I think people have used cryptocurrencies in Nigeria, Afghanistan, etc., to kind of bypass not financial surveillance, but just not having access like to the financial system and being cut off from central governments or central banks collapsing, etc. I know in Venezuela, a lot of people store their wealth in Bitcoin and then transfer it into bolivars because Bitcoin is actually more stable than the bolivar. So that's another good example of people using cryptocurrency. And then I heard a talk while I was at Prelny Polis in Prague about human rights activists using Bitcoin to transact when they've been cut off from the financial system by their governments. So when I listen, and I've heard those claims and those talks be made in a lot of different conferences, but it was the first time I got to be in person and actually meet people. And the biggest misconception, I think, is that the people, the rights activists and the people using these technologies, I think the biggest misconception is that, how do I put this, is that like they're Bitcoin shills, or they're just like actively looking to push the price of Bitcoin or whatever. That's not the case at all. There was this tool available and people were adopting it in like 2012, 2013. And it's just continued to be the tool for people to transmit money when they're being censored by a government. And it's just continued to work. Like, so people, and I know there's specific instances, like if you look at specifically the Canadian truckers, it didn't work out as well as people wanted it to. But for the overall bigger picture, Bitcoin has been widely used in these circumstances, and it's been widely used effectively. So I think the big thing that we need to reconsider throughout all of this is that, yes, that we believe that true censorship resistance and true permissionlessness and true fungibility requires privacy, but we do need to look at the history of Bitcoin and be appreciative of the fact that it's been used in a lot of these different circumstances. So I just think that's something I wanted to clarify. I don't think the future is going in that direction. And I actually gave a guest lecture at a university talking about this specifically, how Bitcoin has solved that problem and been that solution for this gap for a while, for people who have been cut off from the financial system and need to have financial infrastructure. I don't know, and I'm not convinced that it's going to be that way in the future. It might be. I might be wrong, but I don't think so. So the second part of that I wanted to jump to was the fact that people are actually very resistant a lot of the times. I think, and that's only within our crypto Twitter ecosystems and echo chambers. People are resistant to the using of like different options or different cryptocurrencies like Zcash within a situation that people are unbanked and trying to escape financial surveillance, etc. I think the resistance actually comes from more of like the Bitcoin maximalist types saying that like, oh no, Bitcoin is perfect and can solve for these situations perfectly because it's done so in the past. I'm not entirely convinced on that because I think that a lot of like central and authoritarian governments are going to ramp up their blockchain surveillance techniques and kind of, if you're not familiar, if you send a Bitcoin or part of a Bitcoin to someone across the world and they're using it because they don't have access to financial infrastructure, typically is what happens is they go to a currency trader and they give that trader the Bitcoin and then they receive fiat so they can spend fiat and buy things. So it's like essentially all roads lead back to fiat because there's not enough liquidity in these environments to spend Bitcoin in like merchants and things like that for everyday life. So let's just theoretically think that if like governments started planting, agents as, currency traders and they were also surveilling blockchain transactions, they would be able to figure out like which person is owning that Bitcoin address and which person is like exchanging that Bitcoin into fiat, and like are they deemed a criminal by the eyes of the state, right? So that's like a really scary situation that might become more prevalent as these governments are ramping up their surveillance programs. So when you actually speak to people in these situations, from my experience, is extremely limited, and it is nowhere near the amount of like interactions that people from different organizations in the Bitcoin community have had or other people in the Zcash community. But from my experience, when I talk to these people, they're very open to the idea of using another cryptocurrency and using another option if it provides better user privacy within a certain amount of time. Because what they're doing is they're just transacting and they're taking that and then they're trying to, exchange it into fiat. And obviously there's privacy implications with that, but it might be better privacy than what Bitcoin's providing. So the idea is like my spiel here isn't that like people are open to this idea, and we just need to be more cohesive as an ecosystem and kind of just explore these different options and different opportunities for people to use different cryptocurrencies within certain circumstances. Because the people on the ground who are using these tools, from my experience and those who I've spoken to, they're open to the idea of using something that might be a better option, but they really trust Bitcoin because it's worked for them for a really long time. So we shouldn't be going out in the community and saying, hey, Bitcoin sucks because it's public and you shouldn't use it and you're going to be surveilled or whatever, because in the history of time, people have used it and they really trust it because it's worked for them. So it's more about showing that this potential society that's possible and these technologies that are being developed, and kind of showing them, hey, when this future situation arrives and Bitcoin might not succeed in every circumstance, there are other options that you might want to have available at your disposal. So I think that's a really good way to look at this, and look at this in a more holistic format, and just getting everybody on the same page and everybody working together to provide permissionless, censorship resistant money to everyone in the world. So I do want to say, like, I did get into like a back and forth with someone around this on Twitter, and like me and that person like actually like completely agree. I think we just like the language that I use and the language that they use is just very different. But like I think everyone in the Zcash community really agrees with this concept that, hey, Bitcoin's been really great in these certain circumstances, but we might need to use something else in the future. I'm not claiming at all that I think that makes Zcash holistically better than Bitcoin. I mean, honestly, I'm not smart enough to make that claim in either direction. I don't know which is the better option for long-term censorship-resistant money. I just know that within certain circumstances where users need ultimate privacy, I do think that Zcash is a better option, and that alone makes it something really worth working on and make worth getting into the hands of the people that need it the most. So just an interesting caveat for the day, an interesting thought. I think that this ecosystem is not zero sum, and I don't think there's going to be, one winner. I think there's going to be a lot of different winners for a lot of different things. And I think within the terms of like this idea of freedom money that works all the time, I think Zcash is in a really, really good position to potentially do that. So just wanted to provide some thoughts and color on that this morning. If you agree with me, great. If you disagree with me, feel free to shoot a tweet at me so we can have a conversation in public and kind of just see where our thoughts are and where we might, not be aligning. Because I think ultimately everyone here in this ecosystem, and even outside of Zcash, we all agree on like 96 to 97% of everything we're trying to accomplish. It's just that last little bit there that we're trying to like determine like which is the right direction to go. So Yep, that's all my thoughts for this morning. That's the latest news. I've just attached the newsletter so you can get access to all the news in the description here. And yeah, I hope you guys appreciate this. The second edition. If you have any feedback for the show, please send it over. I'm always trying to improve and make this better. And yeah, thank you guys so much and have a great day.